Starting us off at number 10 is America Sings. So back in 1974, Debbie Stone was an 18-year-old hostess at the Disneyland in the America Sings attraction. Now, for this attraction, you would be seated in a theater facing a stage, and during these shows, it was the job of the hostess to stand on the left-hand side of each stage to greet the audience. But tragically, one night when the last show got over and the stages were shifting position in between the 45-second interval, a guest from the adjacent theater heard a blood-chilling scream. When he and the operators rushed to the scene, they were horrified to see Debbie Stone crushed between the walls of the two theaters. After the catastrophe, the attraction was shut down for 3 days so they could adjust safety protocols, but kind of shockingly, with only a few tweaks, they opened it right back up to the public. Now, the good news is that eventually, by 1996, the attraction was shut down for good. However, the theater was redesigned and reopened in 2015 as the Tomorrowland Expo Center, and many still fear that the building is haunted by the ghost of Debbie Stone, so it's best not to go snooping around the area. Next up at number 9, Superstar Limo. Once called the quote, worst ride ever by theme park tourists, Superstar Limo was a dark Disney attraction that did not last long, at least not in a physical sense. Right off the bat, the concept behind the ride was strange. The original idea for the ride was to put guests in the position of celebrities trying to evade paparazzi in a wild, high-speed ride through Hollywood. However, while the ride was being installed in 1997, the infamous and tragic death of Princess Diana, who died in a car crash while her driver was trying to evade paparazzi, put a sour taste on the whole project. Following this, Disney tried to pivot by slowing down the ride and adjusting the storyline, and finally opened it up to the public in 2001. But even with the changes, it received such poor response from guests that it closed only 1 year later and has remained one of the least well-received attractions in Disney history. That being said, it has since been replaced by an attraction based on Monsters, Inc. that uses the same tracks and vehicles, and some think the ride still holds bad luck and avoid it at all costs. Moving on to number 8, Space Mountain. So obviously, Space Mountain is not a prohibited ride at Disney Park. I mean, I just want to get that right out of the way. So obviously, Space Mountain is not a prohibited ride at Disney parks. I mean, I just want to get that right out of the way. But what it does have is a spooky legend that may make you question if you ever want to ride it again. As the legend goes, a ghost who goes by the name of Mr. One Way, often described as having both red hair and a red face, has been reported to hang out in the queue of the attraction and make conversation with other patrons before suddenly disappearing right before their eyes. Then once the ride begins, it's said he will appear as if out of nowhere and take a seat on the ride. But right before the final tunnel at the end, he is once again gone in a flash. Those that claim to have sat down beside him say they've been in the middle of a conversation with him only for him to vanish, and that while he himself might not be out to get ya, the idea of talking to a ghost is scary enough to think about. So unless you're looking for a new ghost companion, this is probably one to avoid. Coming in at number 7, the extraterrestrial encounter. Usually when it comes to Disney parks, it's a pretty safe bet that everything is gonna be family friendly. I mean, that is kind of their whole deal after all. However, it's not always the case. Back in 1994, inspired by the hit franchise Alien, Disney decided to try something different, and it was interesting to say the least. The ride had sort of a soft launch in 1994, but former Walt Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner remarked that the ride wasn't intense enough, and so he sent his Imagineers back to the drawing board. After some thinking, they produced a ride to include a gory pre-show that ended in a disfigured alien, loud noises, strobe lights, and with with a script that many referred to as having the familiar feel of a childhood nightmare. And I mean, isn't that just what you are looking for when you go to a Disney park? As is expected, the ride was controversial at the time and received a lot of backlash for being too frightening for younger audiences, especially considering there was reportedly no signage to warn patrons of what was going to be waiting for them inside. Eventually there was enough backlash over the attraction that it was shut down and replaced with Stitch's Great Escape in 2004. However, that shut down in 2018 and Disney confirmed it is closed for good. Though some swear the property where it used to sit is haunted, and maybe that's what was so scary about it all along. Moving on to number 6, the Haunted Mansion. For those who didn't know, Disney has a very strict policy when it comes to spreading your loved one's ashes. The policy being that it is absolutely 100% prohibited to do so. Now, the official reason behind this policy, according to Disney, is to ensure the safety and cleanliness of the park environment and to maintain a respectful atmosphere for all guests. However, some believe the real answer might be a little more interesting than that. Legend has it that at Disneyland in California, a little boy's mother spread his ashes in the Haunted Mansion without getting the park's permission to do so, and ever since then he's allegedly been heard crying out for his mother at the end of the ride. So while the ride itself might not be prohibited, it very well may be haunted by the ghost of a boy. So it's creepy nonetheless. Moving on to number 5, Nara Dreamland. Located in Japan, Nara Dreamland opened its doors to the public back in 1961. Now, from the get-go, the plan for this park was to be a part of the Disney franchise. In fact, Kunizo Matsuo, president of the Matsuo Entertainment Company, apparently met with Walt Disney himself to discuss the attraction, with the plan of it being an official Disney park in mind. However, allegedly, after disagreements over the licensing fees for using the Disney characters, there was a falling out and Nara Dreamland was officially not an affiliated park. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what the hell is this doing on a Disney list? Well, despite its lack of official Disney representation, it sure as hell resembles a Disney park if I've ever seen one. Or rather, it did prior to its 2006 closure. Attractions like a large Matterhorn mountain, a castle, and even a monorail could be found, and for many years it remained a ghost town, overgrown with nature and filled with an eerie presence. This of course caught the attention of Disney and horror fans alike for a while, but you had to be incredibly careful, as it was said visitors could be fined and arrested for trespassing into the abandoned property. However, as of 2017, the former theme park was demolished, but make no mistake, it's still not somewhere you should go poking around. While it was abandoned, some that snuck in complained of a feeling like they were being watched or haunted by an angry entity, and it's believed that those same ghosts still haunt the grounds where it used to stand. Coming in at number 4, Snow White's Adventures. When I think of scary Disney movies, I can't say that any really come to mind. However, if I were to pick one, Snow White certainly wouldn't be at the top of my list. But as it turns out, the Snow White ride at Disney World, a whole different story. So back in 1971, Snow White's Adventure opened at Fantasyland in Magic Kingdom on Disney World's opening day. But unlike the one at Disneyland, this one didn't fare as well. In the ride, guests were put into Snow White's point of view as they traveled through frightening scenes involving the evil witch and such, but reportedly the ride was so scary that it was closed in 1994 for redesign to make it more welcoming to younger audiences. However, even with the changes they made, apparently the ride was still seen as too scary, and by 2012, when Fantasyland was being expanded, they just decided to cut their losses and close it down for good. However, what's interesting is that the ride still exists at other locations. So what made the one at Disney World so different? Well, some say that the real reason it shut down was because a terrifying ghost of a witch haunted the ride, and it was she who was frightening off all the patrons, which could mean that her ghost remains where the new attraction stands. So visit if you dare. Moving on to number 3, the Matterhorn. The tragic death of Regina Young, or Dolly as she went by, is one of the better known disasters in Disney's history. So much so that the area where she was killed has been nicknamed Dolly's Dip, and visitors and employees alike say they've been haunted by her presence while inside. However, did you know that she was not the first person to die due to riding the Matterhorn? Reportedly in 1964, a teenage Mark Maples, accompanied by his friend, unbuckled his seatbelt and attempted to stand up in his bobsled while nearing the peak of the mountain. But sadly, Maples lost his balance and was thrown from the sled to the track below, fracturing his skull and ribs and causing internal injuries. Now, unlike Dolly, he did not die right then and there, although that in itself is kind of shocking considering the injuries he sustained, but he did pass away 3 days later due to the accident. So some say that while Dolly might be the most talked about ghost on the ride, she is not the only one. And unless you're looking for a little paranormal action on your next Disney trip, then I would suggest another ride. Moving on to number 2, People Mover. There are lots of different ways to get around Disney, and since the 1960s, one of these ways has been the People Mover. The original system, built in 1967, was essentially a transportation attraction in the futuristic Tomorrowland, where guests could board small little trains that ran on elevated tracks and get a sort of grand tour of the park. However, despite its innocent sounding premise and the fact that a new version remains at Magic Kingdom, the original attraction was actually the site of not 1, but 2 deaths. The first time happened in 1967, only 1 month after it had opened, and a 16-year-old boy died while jumping between 2 moving People Mover cars as the ride was passing through a tunnel. Reportedly, he stumbled and fell onto the track before being hit by an oncoming train that tragically crushed him beneath its wheels and dragged his body a few hundred feet before it was stopped by a ride operator. Then years later in 1980, in an almost identical accident, an 18-year-old was crushed and killed while jumping between moving cars as the ride entered a tunnel. Many say that the ghost of the men haunt the People Mover to this day, and even worse, some fear it could happen again. So whatever you do, don't try to jump from car to car. And last up in our number 1 spot, Tom Sawyer Island. While there might not be an official legend in regards to Tom Sawyer Island, many still claim that they feel a deep feeling of unease or shivers whenever they're visiting. And as it turns out, there is potentially a real-life tragic story to explain why. On June 22nd, 1973, an 18-year-old Bogdan Delarue and his younger brother Dorian decided they wanted to stay on the island a little while longer. So while staff escorted visitors onto the boats to return to the park, Bogdan and Dorian jumped a fence and hid in the woods. However, by 9:30 that night, the brothers decided it was best to head back home, but worrying they would get in trouble if they called for help, they decided to swim back. But because the younger brother did not know how to swim, Bogdan tried to carry him on his back. But about halfway across the river, Bogdan slipped and drowned, leaving poor Dorian to doggy paddle until a ride operator found him and brought him to safety. And shockingly, he was not the only one. Another boy named Philip Strain also lost his life near Tom Sawyer Island. In Philip's case, he and a friend snuck into a cast members only area along the river, stole an inflatable rubber maintenance motorboat, and decided to take it out for a spin. But unable to control the boat, they struck a rock near the island and were thrown into the water. His friend was able to travel back to the shore for help, but sadly by the time they arrived, Philip had died. So could there be some sort of curse attached to Tom Sawyer Island? I'm not sure. I'm keen to find out. Starting us off at number 10 is Lake Buena Vista Airport. If there is one thing that Disney does best, it's branding their empire. And once upon a time, an airport, of all things, was a part of the Disney dynasty. You see, when Walt was first trying to create Epcot, the community, not the theme park, he wanted a regional airport with 4 runways. This vision did not quite come to fruition pavilion, but what we did get was the 1971 Buena Vista Airport. This boutique airport, if you will, was only used by 2 airlines and was meant for Disney guests and employees, and the biggest feature it became known for was that When You Wish Upon a Star played after landing thanks to small grooves in the runway. However, cute factor aside, despite Walt's grand plans, the dream began to die in the 1980s with the construction of the monorail. The airport, now surrounded on either side, became dangerous to use, and so eventually no more flights were allowed in or out. Nowadays, the abandoned airport is mostly used for storage and parking rather than an attraction for the public, but it's said that Walt's abandoned plane is hidden somewhere on the lot, and who knows, maybe his ghost is still in there. Next up at number 9, the Wonders of Life Pavilion. I don't know about you, but when I think about Disney, I don't usually jump to health education. Well, as it turns out, the plan for the original Epcot included a pavilion that was to be dedicated to life and health, which eventually made its debut in 1989. The main attraction of this pavilion was called Body Wars, which was a ride that aimed to simulate what it felt like to travel through the human bloodstream, which, had I had the chance, I would for sure have wanted to get on to live out my Magic School Bus dreams. However, despite running for nearly 18 years, the Wonders of Life Pavilion closed without any explanation in January 2007. At the time of its closure, there were of course tons of rumors. However, the true reason has never been verified. It was just boarded up and closed off, which is definitely a bit suspicious, but could there be something they are hiding from the public that's locked away? I guess we'll never know. Next up at number 8, Pirates of the Caribbean. As the legend goes, during the construction for the Florida version of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, a welder named George was killed in an accident. Now, the exact accident that happened to George does vary depending on who you ask. Some say he was crushed by a falling beam, while others say that he fell from the burning city portion of the ride and died as a result. But no matter how he died, everyone can agree on one thing: that he remains haunting the ride and terrorizing anyone who dares disrespect him. It's said George will stop the ride if he hears you say that you don't believe he's real, and superstitious cast members will greet George when they arrive and say goodbye when they leave to try and stay on his good side. So, with that being said, while it's not technically prohibited, it's not exactly somewhere you want to mess with, so if you do decide to take your chances, make sure you don't piss off George. You never know what might happen. Next up at number 7, Haunted Mansion. This next one is a story from a visitor at Disney World in Florida while riding the Haunted Mansion who claims they witnessed a ghost and allegedly have the photo to prove it. Quote, "As you'll see in the photo, it appears as though a young boy is peeking his head out of the doom buggy and looking directly at me. Not only was he not there when I took the pic, there wasn't a boy of this age within 20 people in front of me in line. And as you can see, he's only a few doom buggies in front of me. Not only that, what's he doing looking at me? There is no flash and no visible light coming from me. It's all infrared and invisible to the naked eye. So could it be that the Haunted Mansion is in fact haunted by real ghosts? Just tread carefully if you try to find out for yourself. You never know what they could want from you." Next up at number 6, Walt's apartment. Depending on how much of a Disney fan you are, you may or may not be familiar with a certain apartment that's located above the firehouse on Main Street at Disneyland. The reason for this apartment was initially nothing terribly exciting, but simply because Mr. Disney himself wanted a place to stay that was on the property to make those late nights and early mornings a little easier. Now, to be fair, Walt's apartment isn't really prohibited anymore. You can go see it if you like, but the question is, should you? While nowadays a light is always left on in the front window, according to the legend, this wasn't always the case. It's said that one day a cast member looking after the apartment tried to turn the light off before leaving. However, after leaving the building, she looked up only to notice that the light was still on upstairs. Confused, but assuming she must have forgotten, she went back up to turn it off and came back downstairs. But once again, it was on. So she went up again, unplugged the lamp, only to find it once again still somehow back on by the time she came downstairs. The final time she went up, she heard an angry voice saying, quote, "I'm still here." And she was so frightened, she ran away and never returned back to work. Who could that voice have belonged to? No one knows for sure, but the light remains on so as to never anger it again. Coming in at number 5, Dolly's Dip. In 1984, Regina Young, or Dolly as she liked to go by, was tragically killed while riding the Matterhorn. It seems there was a malfunction in Dolly's seatbelt, resulting in her falling out of the bobsled and being struck by an oncoming sled. The family eventually settled with the park, and the park simultaneously changed the kinds of seatbelts used for that attraction. However, the park says that the two events are unrelated. Now, of course, the Matterhorn remains a public ride, so you're free to take your chances on it, but be warned, it's said that the ghost of Dolly haunts the ride, specifically at the location she was killed. Referred to as Dolly's Dip, visitors and employees alike say they have been haunted by her presence while inside. Some say they can feel her watching them, while others claim to have seen a full-bodied apparition. But unless you're looking for a little paranormal action on your next Disney trip, then I would suggest lining up for a different ride. Coming in at number 4, Nara Dreamland. Located in Japan, Nara Dreamland opened its doors to the public back in 1961. Now, from the get-go, the plan for this park was to be a part of the Disney franchise. In fact, Kunizo Matsuo, president of the Matsuo Entertainment Company, apparently met with Walt Disney to discuss the attraction with the plan of it being an official Disney park in mind. However, allegedly, after disagreements over the licensing fees for using the Disney characters, there was a huge falling out and Nara Dreamland was officially not an affiliated park. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what the hell is this doing on a Disney list? Well, despite its lack of official Disney representation, it sure resembles a Disney park if I've ever seen one. Or rather, it did prior to its 2006 closure. Attractions like a large Matterhorn mountain, castle, and even a monorail found, and for many years it remained a ghost town, overgrown with nature and filled with an eerie presence. This, of course, caught the attention of Disney and horror fans alike for a while, but you had to be incredibly careful, as it was said visitors could be fined and arrested for trespassing into the abandoned property. However, as of 2017, the former theme park was demolished, but make no mistake, it's still not somewhere you should go poking around. While it was abandoned, some that snuck in complained of feeling like they were being watched or haunted by an angry entity, and it's believed that those same ghosts still haunt the grounds where it used to stand. Coming in at number 3, Nighttime Trespassers. In 1966, 19-year-old Thomas Guy Cleveland tried to sneak into Anaheim's Disneyland by scaling the park's outer fence and climbing along the monorail track. Now, why he was trying to sneak in after hours, we don't really know. But nonetheless, his devious plan all came to a halt when a nearby security guard noticed him. At first, he approached to get him to leave, but then he noticed a monorail was making its way along the tracks, and so he began yelling at Cleveland to get out of the way. At this point, Cleveland jumped and landed on a fiberglass canopy beneath the track to try and clear it, but unfortunately, the canopy did not keep him safe. From there, the 25-kilometer-an-hour monorail struck Cleveland and dragged his body for 40 feet down the track. By the time the monorail had made a complete stop, his body had been torn to pieces. So, whatever you do, for the love of God, don't try to scale the wall and sneak in at night. It might be the last night you ever have. Coming in at number 2, Discovery Island. Originally called Treasure Island, after the 1950 film of the same name, this Disney park opened to the public in 1974 as a premier tourist destination for Disney fans of all ages. Accessible only by resort boat or Disney cruise lines, the original park revolved around the theme of shipwrecks, secret caves, and buried treasure. However, in April 1976, Disney decided to rebrand to the new Discovery Discovery Island. This rebranding waved goodbye to pirate boats and treasure and instead welcomed rich flora and fauna, hoping to invite a more relaxing atmosphere, all while simultaneously showcasing and protecting Florida's local wildlife, which, to be fair, it did for a while. Discovery Island was accredited by the Association of Zoological Parks and Aquariums, and at its peak housed over 500 endangered species. However, much to the public's surprise, Discovery Island was abandoned in 1999. The animals were relocated to a new park, Animal Kingdom, and the island park has remained a ghost town ever since. Now, while it's sort of unclear as to why it shut down, some reasons include wild roaming alligators, along with deadly bacteria found in the park's waters. And while all of that might sound intriguing, I promise you, you do not want to try and visit this one. Walt Disney World has banned all outings to the park. In fact, you're not allowed to get within 50 feet of its shoreline, and legal action can be taken if you're found trespassing. And that's not just a threat. People have actually been banned from all Disney parks for life for attempting to visit. So yeah, if I were you, I would steer clear of this one. And last up in our number 1 spot, River Country. After opening as the first water park at the Walt Disney World Resort in 1976, River Country was a popular destination for many years. And out of all of the places on this list, this one definitely has the wildest backstory. Controversy around the water park started to bubble up back in 1980, when a boy tragically died there due to an amoeba that was found in the water. The amoeba in question managed to kill him by attacking his brain and nervous system. However, Disney was absolved of the blame due to the fact that that specific amoeba could have bred in any fresh water. But the story's not done yet. Fast forward 2 years to 1982, and another boy died at River Country, this time from drowning on the Wuppenhaller slide. This time Disney was sued by the family of the boy, who claimed that there was no proper warning about how deep the water was, and a lifeguard testified, admitting that they had to routinely save dozens of people from that slide on a daily basis. Even so, the park remained open. Then in 1989, another boy drowned there. However, it wasn't until the events in September of 2001 went down that Disney was forced to close the park due to the nationwide tourism cutback. From that day forward, the doors have remained shut and the park has been closed off to the public, though some believe that those who have lost their lives still roam around haunting the grounds.
So starting us off in at number 10, there may be real skeletons in the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction at Disneyland. This is one of my favorite rides, and next time I ride this, I'm gonna jump off the boat into the water and I'm gonna go looking for this. Apparently when they were deciding to build the ride, the Imagineers decided that the prop skeletons, well, they didn't look real enough. So they hit up the UCLA Medical Center for some actual skeletons to be featured. I mean, this just took a whole new level. Throughout the years, most of these have been replaced with replicas and given a proper burial, but apparently there are still some real bones, if not entire skeletons, guarding the treasures. Next up, number 9, there are no modern bathrooms in Magic Kingdom's Liberty Square. Disney really went above and beyond to keep this authentic to its time period. Back in the colonial times, washrooms weren't used on how we use them today, so of course Disney had to make sure to keep this continuity by making sure these are no modern washrooms. Yeah, there technically are some in Liberty Tavern and Columbia Harbor House, but these are set so far back in restaurants that they aren't actually in the Liberty Square anymore. Magic Kingdom's main street doesn't actually have the American flags lining in it. Okay, so obviously it looks like it's lined with American flags, but Disney actually had to make some slight adjustments. They did this to get around a law that says that every flag has to be raised, lowered, and raised at half-mast appropriately. In order to keep the flags flying high for the visitors, all the time, Disney made sure to remove a star here and a stripe there, making the flags technically not American. Coming in at number 7, there's a labyrinth of secret tunnels underneath Disney World. This one has definitely become more well known recently, but it is still a pretty cool kept secret. In order for the cast and crew to get from point A to point B without walking through the park and risk being seen acting out their characters or having their characters be seen in a world that they don't exist in, well, obviously these tunnels are closed off to the public, but apparently it's like a whole other world down down there. The tunnels even have their own barbershops that specializes in Disney approved hairstyles. I don't know if that's real, but I want to go find out. Filling in the number 6 spot today, there is an entirely private members club at Disney World, and it has 4 locations, one in Epcot, one in American Adventure, the one in Magic Kingdom is beside the entrance to Adventureland, and the one in Hollywood Studios is on the 2nd floor of the Hollywood Brown Derby restaurant, and the 4th is being built at Animal Kingdom. All 4 of these have a theme that go along with Walt Disney's life, but unless you're one of the, lucky few, you probably won't have a chance to see inside, but you can be sure that they are swanky, fun, and impeccably decorated. In at number 5, cats roam the ground of Disneyland at night, apparently while doing a walkthrough of Sleeping Beauty's castle. Walt Disney and the Imagineers discovered it was filled with flea-ridden feral cats. They initially were going to adopt them out to cast members, but instead decided to keep them around to help, keep out the mice. Well, except for Mickey and Minnie, of course, because that would be devastating. Next up, number 4, the basketball court inside the Matterhorn. Okay, so this one isn't really a full court, but more of a hop, backboard, and floor marking. But still, you can play basketball inside of the Matterhorn at Disneyland. I don't exactly know why this was put there, especially since every detail of Disney seems to have a unique function, but oh well, it seems like it would be a fun place for Cinderella and Lilo to have a little one-on-one during this break. Alright, coming in number 3, there are scents being pumped through the park. If you walk down Main Street and smell freshly baked cookies, or walk by Pirates of the Caribbean and smell seawater, you're not going crazy. The parks do this in order to enhance the experience of the visitors and make their trip to Disney even more immersive. Even the hotel lobbies have more of a home scent pumping through them to make the guests, more comfortable. Number 2, you can hear a secret conversation on Main Street. Inside the hat shop on Main Street, you can find an antique telephone. If you pick up this phone, instead of being able to make your own call, you'll be able to eavesdrop on a mother and a daughter's phone call in which they're arguing about the price of groceries. This one is not a huge underground secret, but it's definitely a cute little Easter egg that make your visits to the parks that much more fun and immersive. And finally, in at number 1, there's an abandoned water park inside Disney World. Disney World's first water park ran for about 25 years until it closed down in 2001. For some reason, it was never torn down, and it remains there today. It's on an island in the middle of Bay Lake in the park, and although it obviously isn't accessible to the public, there are photos of it that shows moss and vines and other plant life taking over. I mean, a mysterious closure and Disney not wanting to disturb the remains of what was there, well, that definitely has some major curse vibes to me.
Number 10, virus outbreak. Now, I know what you're thinking, duh, they caught that virus in 2020, but no, I'm talking about a different one. At Disneyland, between December 17th and December 20th, 2014, visitors to the park were exposed to measles, resulting in an outbreak that affected the residents of 8 US states as well as Mexico and Canada. The California Department of Public Health was first notified of a suspected measles case on January 5th, 2015, and by February 11th, 2015, at least 39 individuals who had visited at least one of the 2 adjacent Disney parks during the exposure period had become ill. In addition to this likely direct exposure, secondary and unknown transmissions were numerous, resulting in at least 125 cases within the United States by February 11th, 2015. The specific outbreak was declared over in the US in mid-April 2015 after 42 days with no traceable transmissions and 147 having been affected within the United States. This measles outbreak, though, resulted in no known deaths. Number 9. Ashes spread. There's a very popular urban legend that Disney World is full of scattered human remains. World is full of scattered human ashes, particularly in certain parts of the park such as the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and It's a Small World. It's been proven that guests frequently release human ashes within the Disney parks, and Disney understands that this could be a cathartic process for those grieving, but it's important to realize that this violates Disney's rules and also local laws laws about scattering remains. Disney has specifically spoken out, telling the Wall Street Journal that this type of behavior is strictly prohibited and unlawful. Not only is this against the park policy, but any guests spreading ashes will be escorted off the property. This is taken very seriously and is referred to by cast members as a HEPA cleanup incident, since it requires a special cleaning protocol to remove the ash residue. When guests do succeed in scattering ashes on attractions, there are a lot of repercussions. Not only could they be banned from future entry, but it's also disruptive to others enjoying the park. These attractions and areas need to be shut down for technical difficulties, and it delays other people's experiences. It's said that this happens at least once a month. Number 8. Leaving a guest paralyzed. In 1983, James Higgins, who was 18 at the time, fell off Space Mountain at Disneyland and was paralyzed from the waist down, and he suffered from brain damage. He tumbled out of a speeding car and was found unconscious under the tracks of Space Mountain. He tried suing Disney and asked for more than $7 million in damages and compensation. His attorneys claimed that the restraining lap bar used on the high-speed roller coaster type ride at the time of the incident was improperly designed and could have allowed a rider to remove it. During the trial, the jury was taken to the park to ride Space Mountain, and several of the ride's cars were brought into the courtroom to demonstrate their use. A physicist called by Disneyland attorneys said that the lap bar appeared to be defective, but added that gravity probably would have kept the rider from falling out if he followed park instructions. Park attorneys said that James was intoxicated at the time of the incident and trying to show off for friends when he tumbled off the ride. In the end, the jury found Disneyland was not liable for his injuries. Number 7. Harassment of workers. It seems like wherever you work in the customer service industry, you are bound to deal with customers who go too far. Unfortunately, Disney is no exception, and it happens more particularly to female employees who are dressed up as face characters, like those who walk around dressed as a Disney princess. A lot of them have experienced harassment, and an ex-Disney park employee wrote on Reddit about her experience. She said, "I was a Tinkerbell performer for Walt Disney World about 3 years ago, and I can't count how many times people asked me what was under my dress or tried to touch me inappropriately. I would always shame them to my photo pass attendant, their family, and people in line by loudly exclaiming, 'You want to know what's under my dress? Well, there's pixie dust, of course.' Or, 'This man is a pirate. He's trying to reach the pixie dust that I keep under my dress.' And then they'd walk away in shame like the creepy people they are." Now, since face characters are never allowed to break character, there isn't much they can do about the harassment, which is pretty scary. Number 6. People taking their own lives. With a place like Disney, it's shocking that there are so many people who go there to end their life. Unfortunately, this has happened many times over the years. The main place for this is at Disneyland in California and is at the Mickey and Friends parking structure. The first account happened in 2010 when a 61-year-old man jumped from the top floor of the parking structure. He left behind a note explaining his personal issues were the reason why he did that. In 2012, a 23-year-old man was found near the northwest corner of the parking structure and was pronounced dead at the scene. It was investigated as if the man had taken his own life at the time, but there were no witnesses. In 2016, a 40-year-old man jumped from the parking structure just after 2 a.m. He was rushed to UC Irvine Medical Center and pronounced dead at 3:08 a.m. And now the most recent death took place in December of 2022, where a 51-year-old elementary school principal jumped from the top floor and was pronounced dead at the scene. These stories are all so sad, and if you ever get these feelings, please know that there are people and resources to help you. Number 5. Fell out of a ride. In September 2000, a guest fell out of the Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin ride in Disneyland and suffered serious internal injuries, cardiac arrest, and brain damage after being dragged underneath the car. The speculated reason for this was a malfunction with the lap bar. It was said by witnesses that the bar on the cart to strap the rider in did not lock in any position, there were no safety straps, and the bar did not go over the rider's lap. Now, according to investigators with Cal/OSHA, the state safety agency, the lap bars in the ride's cars are raised and lowered manually by the Disneyland ride operator and worked independently of each other. Disney said park officials believe that their employees followed all the park procedures, including those for lap bars. The police and the Disney president said that there was no malfunction with the ride to cause this. The guests lived, but there was a serious delay between the time of the incident and when medical emergency personnel were contacted, leading Disney to review and change their policies. Unfortunately, it was was too late. The guests lived for 9 more years with the consequences of that fateful ride until they passed away in January 2009. Number 4. Drownings. In June 1973 and in June 1983, guests drowned in the River of America's attraction in Disneyland, both after violating the rules. The first incident involves 2 brothers who stayed in the park after closing. They stayed on Tom Sawyer's Island past closing time by hiding in an area that is off limit to guests. When they wanted to leave the island, they tried to swim across the river, though one of them didn't know how to swim. The older brother attempted to carry his brother on his back and drowned halfway across. His body was found the next morning, while the younger brother was able to stay afloat by dog paddling until a ride operator rescued him. The second incident involved a man drowning by trying to pilot a rubber emergency boat from Tom Sawyer's Island, which he and a friend had stolen from a restricted area of the island during Disneyland's annual grad night. The boat capsized and he drowned. Both individuals were intoxicated at the time of the incident, and the victim's mother sued Disneyland for allowing her inebriated son onto the premises, but the lawsuit was unsuccessful. Number 3. Hit by another car. In 1984, 48-year-old Dolly Young was riding the Matterhorn bobsled in Disneyland when her seatbelt was unfastened. She fell out and plummeted to the track below, only to be hit by another car and get dragged along the rails before the ride was stopped. Due to this, she got decapitated. She was pronounced dead at the scene due to her massive head and chest injuries. Afterwards, an investigation found that her seatbelt was not buckled. It's unclear whether she deliberately unfastened her belt or if the seatbelt had malfunctioned. Since then, the section where she was struck on the Tomorrowland side of the mountain has been known as Dolly's Dip, and park employees claim that she still haunts the ride. Former ride operator named Kristen, who worked at the park from 1989 to 1995, claimed that she could feel a supernatural presence while operating the Matterhorn, and that other staffers told her they had seen a ghost while on the job. She said, "I worked that ride for several years and I never saw her, but I sure did feel her." Number 2. Being crushed. In 1974, an employee named Debbie Stone was crushed to death between a rotating wall and a permanent theater wall in the America Sings attraction in Disneyland. At around 10:30 p.m., when the last show got over and the stages were shifting positions in between the 45-second interval, a guest from the adjacent theater heard a blood-chilling scream. When he and the operators rushed to the scene, they were horrified to see Debbie Stone crushed between the walls of the 2 theaters. To this day, no one knows exactly what went wrong, but there have been numerous theories. Some state that Debbie may have been inclining towards the adjacent stage to talk to a fellow cast member, or she may have attempted to jump from one stage to the other, or she may have been distracted and stepped backwards without noticing. Either way, this death was just tragic. And coming in at number 1 is not caring for disabled guests. Disney is supposed to be a fun place that includes everyone no matter their differences, but it seems like the park didn't take their disabled guests into consideration. In 2009, the ride It's a Small World Holiday in Disneyland broke down while the other guests were evacuated off the ride, while this guest was not, as he was in a wheelchair. The guest was stuck in the ride's goodbye room, the final setting of It's a Small World Holiday, for 30 to 40 minutes before being evacuated. In addition to being wheelchair bound, he also suffered from panic attacks and high blood pressure, and these things were aggravated by the blaring Christmas carols due to them being unable to exit the ride. Rather than calling firefighters to evacuate the guests, Disneyland staffers waited for the ride to be fixed. When the guest was finally able to lead the ride, it took 3 hours to medically stabilize them at a Disneyland first aid station once they were rescued. The guests sued Disney for its inadequate evacuation procedures for disabled guests and for not providing proper warnings for those who could not evacuate during a ride stoppage. In March 2013, a jury awarded the man $8,000 and the safety key was introduced.
At number 10, the ghost of Walt Disney. In the eerie world of Disney, where magic and imagination collide, there exists a sinister underbelly shrouded in the shadows of the supernatural. The tale of the Main Street's fire hall's second-story windows serves as the haunting reminder of the ghostly presence that lingers within the happiest place on earth. Before Walt Disney's untimely departure from this world, the illuminated beacon in that very window acted as a silent signal for staff to uphold their best behavior in his presence. But when the visionary himself passed into the great beyond, that light went dark, as if mourning mourning the loss of its master. Yet, the supernatural plot thickens. On one fateful day, that light flickered to life once more, defying the natural order of things. An unsuspecting worker attempted to extinguish it, only to have it rekindle when she turned away. Now the light remains a permanent fixture, an eerie reminder to both employees and guests alike that Walt Disney's spirit still roams the park. To the visitors, it may appear as a sentimental gesture, a beacon of his enduring legacy, but for those who toil behind the scenes, it carries an unsettling weight, a constant reminder that in the realm of Disney, even the most beloved dreams can be possessed by something far more ominous. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to MA, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9, River Country, the original water park at Walt Disney Resort, has a chilling history that some attribute to darker forces. In 1980, tragedy struck when a boy succumbed to a brain-eating amoeba found in the water. Disney managed to evade responsibility by highlighting that such amoebas could flourish in any freshwater source. But the park's sinister tale didn't end there. In 1982, another young life was claimed, this time by the treacherous Whoop-and-Holler slide. Lawsuits ensued, revealing lifeguards regularly rescuing numerous slide goers. Despite the controversy, River Country persisted until 2001, when nationwide tourism cuts forced its closure. Since then, the park has remained sealed off. Rumors persist, suggesting that the lingering spirits of those who've met their tragic fates may haunt the grounds, leaving behind an eerie legacy that's far from the magic typically associated with Disney. At number 8, those bones ain't fake. When it comes to immersive experiences, Disney has always pushed the boundaries of realism. Take, for example, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Adventureland. See, back in 1967, when this iconic attraction first set sail at Disneyland, Disney's dedication to authenticity reached unsettling levels, to say the least. They sought perfection, and for skeletal pirates, fake bones wouldn't cut it. So they did something macabre yet intriguing. They used real human bones. Yeah, you heard that right. Actual human skeletons adorn the ride. This eerie choice was a result of the technology limitations at the time. The ride opened shortly after Walt Disney's passing, making it the last project he personally oversaw. But even with his meticulous vision, creating lifelike skeletons proved too daunting a task. The solution? Disney reached out to UCLA and obtained real human skeletons. Imagine donating your body to science only for it to end up as a pirate on a theme park ride. Eventually, technology caught up and fake skeletons replaced their human counterparts. The real bones were retired and given a proper burial. Today, Disney claims that no human remains remain on the ride. However, some skeptics suggest that there may still be hidden remnants, keeping the mystery alive in the happiest place on earth. At number 7, Nara Dreamland in Disney Japan. In 1961, Nara Dreamland aspired to join the Disney family with a meet and greet between its owner, Kunzio Matsu, and the illustrious Walt Disney himself. However, a diabolical spat over licensing fees severed the ties. Despite its unofficial status, Nara Dreamland bore a striking resemblance to Disney, boasting a Matterhorn mountain, a castle, and even a monorail. But in 2006, it met its untimely closure, descending into a spectral of silence overrun by nature. Disney's aficionados and horror enthusiasts alike couldn't resist its haunting allure, yet trespassing came with hefty consequences. Many who dared felt a sinister presence and even witnessed angry apparitions lurking in the shadows. In 2017, the park was demolished, but the haunting vibes endure. Beware, adventurers, for demons may yet dance among its ruins. At number 6, It's a Small World. But is it a small world possessed by demons? The eerie reports from staff members about the ride's animatronic characters coming to life at night send shivers down the spine and probably make this claim true. While It's a Small World is meant to exude happiness, there's an undeniable undercurrent of creepiness luring beneath its surface. Imagine unplugging those lifeless dolls only to witness them blinking back at you, or finding them mysteriously relocated during the night. It's the stuff of nightmares, fueled by a sense of unease that makes you question the ride's true nature. Who can say for sure what malevolent forces might be at play within the whimsical facade of this seemingly innocent attraction? Stepping into that world after dark? No, thank you. At number 5, Dolly. The Matterhorn harbors a sinister secret that transcends mere mechanical mishaps. See, back in the year of 1984, Regina Young, affectionately known as Dolly, met a gruesome fate while embarking on this treacherous alpine journey. A seatbelt malfunction plunged her from her bobsled, colliding with a malevolent oncoming sled. Though the park staff absolved itself through a settlement, intriguingly, they revamped the seatbelt system without conceding any connection to Dolly's demise. Enter the spine-chilling legend of Dolly's Dip, a notorious haunt within the Matterhorn. Countless souls have recounted eerie encounters within this accursed locale. Some speak of an uncanny sensation as if Dolly's spectral eyes bore into their very souls. Others tale of witnessing their apparition in its chilling entirety. Should you dare to court the paranormal on your Disney expedition, venture forth. For those seeking less otherworldly thrills, perhaps a different ride beckons. At number 4, George of the Caribbean. The Pirates of the Caribbean, a ride that invokes nostalgia and surprisingly olfactory senses. But let's delve beyond the sense and into the eerie tales that linger within. Legend has it that a welder named George met his untimely demise during the construction of this iconic attraction in 1973. George's spirit, they say, still prowls the ride's dark corridors, the ever finicky ghost. If Disney cast members fail to greet him personally, he'll shut the whole show down. It's curious considering that there's no concrete evidence of George's living existence, but superstitions among cast members run deep. Guests have reported chilling encounters with this apparition, including sightings of a mysterious floating energy ball. At number 3, sea monsters. Disney's evolution is fascinating, with rides like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea embodying its rich history. The ride was a marvel, diving guests into the depths, encountering robotic sea monsters, and reliving cinematic adventures. But maintaining an underwater attraction, as you might imagine, came with hefty costs. Consequently, the ride was drained, abandoned, and its remnants scattered. Yet amidst this seemingly innocuous tale lies a twist of dark whimsy, a tale of abandoned animatronics slowly succumbing to decay. These gargantuan sea monsters now sit forgotten and forsaken, shrouded in water damage, their once majestic presence now ghostly echoes of Disney's past. An eerie reminder that even in the happiest place on Earth, the passage of time can transform magic into haunting relics. At number 2, the Space Mountain Ghost. Dark Disney rides and the supernatural have always encapsulated the minds of many. Take Space Mountain, for example, a seemingly innocent roller coaster. But according to various Disneyland guests and park employees, it's harboring an eerie secret. The haunting presence of a male spirit has left everyone baffled. Who is this spectral intruder, and why does he gravitate towards this ride? Some say it's the ghost of a relentless soul of Mr. Wedway, a man who tragically met his end while constructing the ride. At Disneyland, they've nicknamed him Mr. One Way, and he seems to favor the Space Mountain line. Witnesses describe him as a hefty man with fiery red hair or a flushed face. But here's the twist. Sometimes he takes on the appearance of a young child clad in 70s attire. When he assumes his adult form, he remains eerily silent, lurking in the queue. But when he takes on the form of a child, he chats away as if disconnected from our modern world. There are even reports of him, quote, falling off the ride, sending shivers on the spines of unsuspecting parkgoers. Marla Wesky insists that numerous visitors have witnessed this bizarre spectacle, mistaking it for an actual incident. But in reality, it's just the enigmatic Mr. One Way playing his supernatural games. And at number 1 is the Haunted Mansion. Of course. The Haunted Mansion, Disney's eerie classic, has its own legend swirling around it. Two tales converge into a chilling narrative. One involves a construction worker, the other a test rider, but both stories agree on one thing. The original Haunted Mansion was so terrifying that it allegedly triggered a fatal heart attack. This led to a substantial overhaul, introducing humor and delaying the ride's opening until 1969. The haunting didn't stop there. Disneyland employees claim to have witnessed the ghostly apparition of this unfortunate soul. Another sinister legend is woven around Madame Leota's spellbook. You see, cast members have reported an ominous vibe when near it. Strangely enough, this ancient book dates back to the 1400s and was actually used by a malevolent witch linked to numerous actual human sacrifices. According to the supernatural intrigue, some visitors have made the Haunted Mansion a final resting place by scattering their loved ones' ashes around it. This practice has conjured ghostly entities, as employees have testified. In one harrowing incident, an employee fled in terror, pursued by a spectral horde, presumably spirits left behind by these unconventional internments. The Haunted Mansion's lore is a dark labyrinth of eerie tales, cautioning all to tread carefully.